Can do it without increasing the deficit or raising taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year.
Economists are forecasting an index of, I believe, 7.3% annually. And I was just wanting to ask, what do you see in the data right now that suggests inflation will fall quickly this year? And how confident are you that a decrease in inflation can occur without hurting demand in the economy?
We expect a high year-over-year inflation rate reading in tomorrow's data, given what we know about the last year, right, and what we've seen over the last year. That's because year-over-year data largely reflects the price increases over the last year, as we've already talked about, and we know about. It's not about the most recent trends, which I think is the important component for people to look at, right? The leading outside forecasters continue to project that inflation is expected to decrease over the course and moderate over the course of this year. So that continues to be outside projections, even as we're preparing for the new data tomorrow. I think there was another part of your question, but
getting back to how confident are you that a decrease can occur without hurting demand in the economy? Was the second part of the question.
Well, I would say, as you know, the Federal Reserve has purview over taking the independent approaches they choose to. And we certainly, as the president has said, he welcomes and supports their efforts to take steps, or their plans to take steps.
OPEC is not ramping up increases to the desires of the U.S. What is the plan to control gas prices? This is something that's hitting people every single day.
A three-part plan coming from President Biden. Who, number one, we are engaging internationally, both with oil-producing and oil-consuming countries. In terms of oil-producing countries, we want them to live up to their supply commitments, and we're engaged in diplomatic measures to make that happen.
Well, OPEC says they're going to stick at 400,000 barrels a day. They're not ramping up in the way that you're asking them to. So you may be approaching them, but they're not responding as quickly as you'd like.
So let's talk about what we can do. So oil-consuming countries have strategic reserves, and the last time we released 50 million barrels, many of which are still in train, by the way, the price of gasoline, it wasn't just the strategic release, but it helped. The price of gasoline actually fell by 10 cents a gallon.
For a very short time. You're going to do that again?
That is certainly an option that can be put on the table as needed.
How will the administration pass the child tax credit when Manchin says BBB is done? Can you give us any updates on the Supreme Court process?
What happens to Americans if they do get stranded in Ukraine? Should they understand that the U.S. is not coming to get them?
Well, let's just take a step back here. What people should understand is that the United States does not typically do mass evacuations. Of course, the situation in Afghanistan was unique for many reasons.
That crack pipes are not going to be part of the safe smoking kits that are funded by the administration. But can you clarify for us, were they never a part of the kit, or were they removed in response to this reporting and this pushback?
They were never a part of the kit. It was inaccurate reporting, and we wanted to put out information to make that clear.
What is in the safe smoking kit?
A safe smoking kit may contain alcohol swabs, lip balm, other materials to promote hygiene and reduce the transmission of disease.
We had another state today dropping the indoor mask mandate, as the CDC is confirming that their guidance is not changing. But these decisions that are being made at the local level, like you guys always talk about, are out of step with the science that is at the forefront of the CDC, of this White House. So why are we not hearing the same messaging criticizing states that are, making these moves, like we heard previously with, for instance, Ron DeSantis?
Well, I would say there is a distinct difference between standing in the way, which Ron DeSantis did, or Governor DeSantis, I'll give him his full title, of teachers, school administrators, and others taking steps to protect the students in their school communities.
So do you think it's time to lift these mask requirements in schools? Would you lift them if you were governor of Georgia?
And we can only follow the science and follow our circumstances. Unfortunately, in Georgia, we're not at a place where that conversation is ready.
Because the CDC calls the shots here. It's not like he measures trade-offs, the economy, mental health, people's behavior. It's just when the CDC says it's okay to do, that's what will determine his decision. But he doesn't take into account all these other factors.
Well, what he has made the commitment to the American people on back when he ran for president, and we've tried to abide by, is that he would listen to.
Listen is one
listen to the data, listen to the science.
Determine is, what does listen mean? Does it mean that the CDC calls the shots here, or as these governors have done, does the president take into account the trade-offs? I mean, this is about public health. It's not like just some kind of abstract thing in a vacuum. Kids' mental health is affected by wearing masks. Human behavior is part of this. The economy is part of this. Does he take those into account, or does he assume the CDC will do that for him?
Well, I think, Mara, it's also important to note that masks are effective at...
We're now signing statements saying it's time to lift mask mandates, especially for kids.
I understand that, but we rely on the health and medical experts who work in the federal government, as we should, even as we account for and consult with outside experts.
Look, we started seeing this rise in cases in 2020, and I'll be frank and say in Chicago, there was a correlation that we believe between remote learning and the rise in carjacking.
If there isn't a full-blown invasion, which obviously is at least as likely as there being one, and it could be, 100 different things that could be happening over the next month, year, 2 years, not to mention that Russia already occupies part of Ukraine and so on. What's the rationale for supporting Nord Stream at all?
We don't support Nord Stream. We have been clear we oppose the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is community. That's long been our position. It's, again, if Russia invades Ukraine, Nord Stream 2 will not come online.
In a matter of weeks, Americans have heard the White House say masks are so important, you should get online and order yours for your family right now. You've got now this wave of states that are saying, actually, you don't have to necessarily wear masks. We're going to do away with some of these mandates. And now you've got the CDC saying its guidance stands. We're going to review things, but the guidance stands. Can you blame Americans for being confused and frustrated and having no idea who they should be listening to right now?
Well, our guidance has consistently been this.
Americans are confused by what's happening?
Well, I think we should do everything we can to prevent them from being confused. So I'm restating what our policy is here from the federal government, which is based on public health guidelines.
And does the CDC run the risk of becoming irrelevant in the minds of many Americans, given that their states are moving along ahead without them?
Well, I don't think the federal experts on health and medical advice should be irrelevant to Americans at a time where we're still...
Does the White House believe that lawmakers should own stock?
And he also believes that all government agencies and officials, including independent agencies, should be held to the highest ethical standards. It's early in the legislative process, so I don't have a new comment today on the specifics of this legislation.
Question. Senator Manchin has talked about there's no more Build Back Better bill publicly. Has the White House or your team ever considered rebranding the bill, a name change? Is that something that you've considered and you think would be beneficial?
Sure. Look, I think our objective is working with Democrats, Republicans. If they decide they're for lowering the cost of prescription drugs, they're welcome to join us in this effort. But to determine how much of the president's Build Back Better agenda, whatever you call it, can be moved forward.
And does the administration risk looking out of touch with where the country is heading in terms of lifting these mask mandates if the CDC doesn't revise its guidelines?
Well, again, we understand where the emotions of the country are, right? Our talks with Iran have reached an urgent point on mutual return to full implementation of the JCPOA. A deal that addresses the core concerns of all sides is in sight, but if it is not reached in the coming weeks, Iran's ongoing nuclear advances will make it impossible for us to return to the JCPOA. So those talks and conversations are ongoing, but I would say that as we noted back, I believe in December, the president asked his team to prepare a range of contingencies because we are at a pivotal point because of the progress that they have made in recent years as a result of the former president and his team pulling out of the nuclear deal.
Is it the sense inside the White House that the decisions by Democratic governors to relax some of these mask guidelines is driven mostly by, as you said, the speed of politics and not the public health guidelines that are driving the federal government's policy?
I didn't actually make that assessment, but I would point you to all of them to ask them questions about what they base their decision making on. But again, we understand local leaders. We continue to advise local leaders, whether they're governors or others, to make decisions based on the science.
Yeah, yesterday in the event you highlighted electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Today you're highlighting the utility companies are here. 3% of the market is electric for vehicles in the U.S. So if Americans go out and buy a lot of electric cars, can the grid handle the load without using more coal power?
Well, I think we're trying to address this from many fronts, right? As you
wind and solar handle that amount of load on the system.
Well, again, we're working to increase all of the components of what is needed to ensure that electric vehicles can be powered across the country.